Howdy neighbor, how is your garden growing? Me and my garden? Well, I want to talk to you about the food and flowers that you could be growing here in the month of April. So if you're looking for ideas of vegetables, fruits, herbs, flowers, and tips for your garden here in the Sunshine State, this is the video for you. And as always, I'm going to be using my handy dandy Wild Floridian garden planner to help keep us on track. It's full of ideas of what to plant, when to plant it, and places to track it, come up with ideas, and project manage. And if you want to pick up yours, you can do so at the link right here. Let's talk vegetables. In the month of April, whether you live in North, Central, or South Florida, you should consider growing hot weather crops. If you're not familiar with hot weather crops, they're going to be things from loofah, okra, roselle, cranberry hibiscus, Everglades tomatoes, and Seminole pumpkins, along with sweet potatoes. And what makes hot weather crops great to start this time of the year is that they love and thrive more so in the heat of our summers. So getting them started by seed at this time of year is one of the best things to do. The other reason you want to get them started at this time of year is because they tend to take a long time to get to harvest, which means the earlier that you get these started by seed, the sooner that you're going to be able to move to harvest and potentially be able to flip that bed back over to a warm weather crop or cold weather crop later this year. If you live in North Florida, because you guys stay a little bit cooler, you have a little bit more time to go ahead and do warm weather crops. Now, if you're not familiar with warm weather crops, it's going to be things like your classic tomatoes, peppers, beans, corn, and eggplants. Now, because we're at the very tail end of the warm weather season, you're going to want to focus on just buying transplants or trading transplants with your neighbors at this time of year. The reason is because we are rapidly starting to heat up and our sun intensity is getting very strong. The sooner that you guys have these in ground and they have time to establish roots, the more likely you're going to get harvest before the pest pressure really moves in the next month. Hi, puppy. Now, for many of you, you may be feeling like, wait a minute, does that mean that I've missed the vegetable season? Have I missed all the vegetable crops this year? And the answer is no, you have not missed it. But you're gonna have to start to do things, well, this is kind of where the difference is the difference. See, here in Florida, we're on a totally different timetable than the rest of the country. And at this time of year is when so many of you beginners will come and try to do the things that Northerners do. You're trying to follow their timelines and you're gonna really struggle. So what I really want you guys to do is take this tip and lean into the hot weather crops this month. Go start exploring those seeds. And a lot of these you can get on places like Southern Exposure, Seed Exchange, online. And there are other seed companies out there that also have seeds that will work great for you. And I would love for those who have some experience with some of these crops to definitely share which ones that you find a lot of success with down below, so that all these beginners who are starting to look into gardening at this time of year don't have to learn the hard way like you and me did years ago. So one of the good things that you guys can do at this time of year is focus on those hot weather crops. And let's dig into one of the ones I think you really should consider focusing on this month, and that's gonna be Seminole pumpkin. Now, Seminole pumpkins is one of the hands down best pumpkins slash squashes that you could be growing here in Florida. And the reason is, well, it might actually be native to Florida. The debate goes back and forth on whether it was here pre-European contact or not, but at the end of the day, we definitely know that for hundreds and hundreds of years, it has been indigenous to the south of the United States. Lots of Floridians, including myself, can tell you how well it grows here. And bonus about this plant is that it's in the same family of pumpkins slash squashes as butternut squash. So if you love butternut squash, if you love making butternut squash soup or just baking it and adding in like cinnamon and lots of good stuff, then you're gonna like Seminole pumpkin. It is very similar in flavor. It's very similar in texture. I think many of us would probably say it's a little bit more watery than a butternut squash, so maybe better for making a soup. But what it definitely is very, very easy to grow here. I have had Seminole pumpkins in my garden for years. It's one of those plants that I've been basically able to like plant once, and then similar to what I talked about last month with the Everglades tomatoes, like you kind of just, it'll re-pop up over and over again and run around. Now, if you are gonna get this one started by seed right now, which you could still do, you're gonna wanna think about putting it in a place where it can get to semi-shade. You're gonna want a sunny location for where the seed gets started, but then you want it to be able to run into some semi-shade areas, because this plant will get stressed out in the heat of the summer, but it won't necessarily die. Where I find that a lot of people have challenges is when it's in full blasting sun all day, I'd say all night, but not all night, but basically from sun up to sundown, it's in full sun. That's where we tend to see it get a bit stressed out. But when it's able to run into shady areas and then come back out and run back another way, they will tend to do really well. And even if you don't get a crop before the high heat of summer, don't worry, that plant will bounce back in the fall time and be producing pumpkins. Now, what's great about these pumpkins, if you're not familiar with them, is they tend to be pretty small. So they sit in that 3, 5, 10, 12 pound range. So they're not having to sit for a whole season to get really large. And a single vine is going to put out multiple pumpkins. And I honestly think that's more beneficial than like those jack-o'-lantern style pumpkins, because you are going to be eating this. You don't want to have 50 pounds of it all at once. You want to have a little bit regularly. So having a pumpkin that's in that 3, 6, 10 pound range is perfect, especially if you have 1 to 4 people in your family. The other great thing is these pumpkins, they store really well. They can be stored inside your house, but they also can be stored inside your garage. I do it all the time. I have like, my cart is just filled with probably about 12 pumpkins right now. And they will stay there for a good 6 months without having any problems. Now, me personally, when it comes to using this, we tend to like using it in a Seminole pumpkin fettuccine Alfredo. We basically add Seminole pumpkin to an Alfredo sauce. It's like really, really good. And the way that we can actually make our lives easier is we will chop it up and puree it and then freeze like little bricks of it in order to add into the Alfredo sauce when we go to make it, which makes it a lot faster. But we've also done dishes where we just cut it in half and bake it and then add things like rice and beans into the inside. There's a lot of options. So if you're interested in getting into this one, you can definitely look up butternut squash recipes to consider using it for. And then 2, I know you can get the seeds at Southern Exposure online, but there are probably a lot of other places like David the Good's Daughter, and there's people like Jera who tend to sell these seeds online. So go check those out. And if you know of another reliable source for Seminole pumpkin seeds that work great here in Florida, please let us know down in the comments. Snack time. In addition to things like Seminole pumpkins, well, I want you to consider this plant right here. Amidst my strawberries is growing an Everglades tomato, and this is another great one for you to start this time of year. They are known for being able to handle Florida's heat, humidity, pest pressure, and of course, sun intensity. And just like this one, once you get one plant going, you will tend to find it popping up everywhere in your garden. This is a currant sized tomato and is technically a different type of tomato than all the other tomatoes that you might grow or find at the store, which is what makes it so great for doing so well here in Florida. And many have said that this one is actually native to Florida, though the technical resources kind of go back and forth on whether it is or isn't. But regardless, it grows so well here. And it's one of those sweet little snack popper type tomatoes that are great for the garden. Now, in addition to these seed starting and transplants that you could be doing this month, you also should be considering removing some of your cold weather crops. This would be things like your broccolis, your lettuces. They are at this point tending to be bolting and done. So it's a really good time to clear them out and prepare the way for things like your hot weather crops, or you can let them bolt, throw their flowers, and then have seeds so that you can collect them to use later this year. Yeah, later this year. That's one of the great things about Florida, is that we go through our vegetable season so quickly that you don't have to wait a whole year to get restarted. You're just gonna be waiting, honestly, a few months, and then we'll be back into seed starting for cold weather crops. So consider whether it makes more sense to clear the bed or to get some seeds. And another reason that you might want to keep these bolting plants is that the bees actually enjoy the flowers, and having food for your bees at this time of year is going to be a great benefit if you went and planted those warm weather crops earlier this year. So consider, do you leave them? Do you clear them out? Do you leave them for the bees? Or are you like me? You're just keeping these broccoli flowers around because you feel they're really pretty. Let's get to my tip of the month, which is going to be, you need to be watching your water in this month. April, hands down, in Florida, is the driest month of the year. Now, every year can be a little bit different. Sometimes we'll get a little bit more rain, sometimes we'll get a little bit less. But on average, across the last 20, 30 years, April has been our driest month, which may be a little shocking because you might be like me and you learned April showers bring May flowers. Which will still be kind of true, because from native flower standpoint, there's gonna be still some rain. We typically get about 1.5 to 2 inches of rain on average across the state of Florida, and those native flowers will start waking up. But your plants, like vegetables, may be a little bit less happy. So consider getting a rain gauge or just watching your plants for signs of lack of water, like yellowing of leaves at this time of year. The other friendly reminder is because we continue to be in the drought time of year and we're at the very tail end of this time of year, is that our water table has gotten very, very low. So even our larger perennial plants are still stretching down for water. Now this can be mitigated if you have an irrigation system, but the watch out in the month of April is this is the time of year, usually April and May, a lot of cities and counties are going to start enacting water restrictions and asking you to use your sprinklers a lot less. So doing activities like adding living mulches or cut mulches like your grass down to the ground will allow your soils to maintain moisture and maybe add a little bit back in to help preserve what water does come down from the sky at this time of year. Now let's talk herbs. At this time of year, you can do everything from basil to dill, lavender to sages, parsley, chives, coriander. You kind of got the gamut of stuff. Now, when I talk about starting these herbs, I'm talking about doing it by transplant. In general, because these are cold weather and warm weather herbs, you're basically at the transplant season and past any seed starting. And as a friendly reminder about these herbs, do check the sun needs of them, because some plants like your oreganos are not going to want to be in full sun. But this can be an advantage as we head into these warmer time of years, is to get a pot, fill it with some of the herbs that you definitely want to grow, and move it to one of those semi-shade locations that you may not have used because your vegetables want a little bit more sun. And one of my favorite ideas that you guys gave me is putting your herbs in your green stocks, especially with the ones with the movable wheels, so that you guys can move them into sunnier locations and shadier locations depending on the time of year. And I think this is such a fantastic idea and makes a lot of sense with the spacing that a lot of these herbs take up. So whether you're gonna go get something like a green stock or just a pot that has wheels on it, I love this idea, and I really appreciate you guys sharing it with me so that I could share it back out with all of you. Let's talk fruits. When it comes to this time of year, you have so many options. Tropical trees, tropical giant grasses, tropical, just basically everything at this time of year, because we have the heat, we have the sun intensity. But what we lack with establishing these plants like bananas and papayas and mulberries is water. So if you're going to get any of these plants started this month, I would definitely consider getting them, but also making sure that you have a game plan to water them regularly. And I know at this time of year, some people have spring break. Also, we have Easter coming, so I would just be very mindful when you buy it, so that when you put it in the ground, you have the ability to regularly go out there and water it to establish it for the first month and a half, until especially we get the rainy season. Once we get the rainy season, you don't need to worry about watering these things. There's just like so much rain, but we're not there yet, which may cause you to think, well, maybe I should wait. And you might. That's often what I did, is I waited till the summer times so that I could kind of be on the easy side. But because a lot of these plants are going to want 6 months, 8 months, 9 months for their first crop, especially things like bananas and papayas, and sometimes mulberries, getting them in early in the hot, warm season is a real benefit to you, so that you have the opportunity to potentially get a harvest in year one. But if you don't get in time, that's okay. You'll definitely get a harvest the following year. I just know we're just all a little impatient. We all want to get a harvest so soon. And it probably won't happen in the first year, but the odds increase if you start it like now. Talk flowers. Flowers? Flowers. The sun's in my eyes, sorry. And you have so many options this month, from warm weather to hot weather flowers. You should be considering things like Florida friendly flowers such as gaillardias, gomphrenias, ageratums, and salvias. They look really pretty at this time of year. When it comes to Florida native plants, I would consider adding things like swamp milkweed, sunshine mimosa, and our cone flowers. And you have a lot of options at this time of year. I'm going to move because it's too bright. When it comes to our native cone flowers, there's a lot that you could be transplanting at this time of year. Everything from cut leaf coneflower to black-eyed Susans to orange coneflowers, and of course, purple coneflower. And the reason I recommend purple coneflower, aka echinacea, at this time of year is it tends to be the first bloomer of our coneflowers for the season. If you're interested in having kind of a purpley pink type coneflower that attracts bees, attracts butterflies, and later on when it seeds will actually feed our birds, this is a great native plant for you. Now, when it comes to its native range in Florida, it's only native to the very northwest portion of the panhandle, and the rest of us, well, we don't have a native alternative. But if you get the native eco type of purple coneflower, which you're not going to find from a general seed company, it will work really well here. And yes, if you were thinking echinacea, wait, is that herbal medicinal plant that I've heard people put in their cottage gardens? Yes, same one. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, I love the idea of purple coneflower, but what else could I have? You know me, I'm always recommending orange coneflower, aka Rutabaga fulgida. This one is a great one for your garden and will bloom huge times of the year. And once established, if you live in a zone 10 or 11, it might even bloom in the winter time. So consider at this time of year adding a coneflower into your garden, especially our native ones and the native ecotypes, which you can find at your native nurseries. And if you're looking for a way to figure out a native nursery near you, y'all, let us know in the comments. You can also check out the Florida Association of Native Nurseries or ask your local chapter of Florida Native Plant Society. Whew, I had to get out of that sun. It was a bit too intense. And actually that brings me to a couple of tips for this month, which is one, you need to start considering that you're doing your gardening early in the day in the shade or late in the day in the shade, because the sun intensity, well, we're there now. It's getting really sunny. It doesn't matter how hot it's getting at this time of year. We are now hitting high intense sun. We are hitting UV indexes that are going to be what northerners see as their peak summer sun. And now this is just like our normal sun, which means that if you're going to be doing a lot of gardening outside more than a couple minutes, you really should consider gardening early in the day or late in the day outside of direct sunlight as much as possible. And if you do need to garden in sunlight, you should be of course putting on sunscreen and also considering wearing things like long sleeves, big hats, and gloves just for the aspect of sun protection. And if you're looking for some additional tips and plant ideas for the month of April, go ahead and check out last year's April garden guide. Or if you just want to go ahead and read them and be able to track your own results, go ahead and pick up the Wild Floridian garden guide right here. Okay, I'll see you soon. Bye.